We're a unique podcast for families of faith, produced by parents and pastors who understand and appreciate how hard it is to maintain your faith in a hostile culture. We're here to encourage and support you in the most vital role of all, parenting. If you're feeling overwhelmed and afraid, it's okay. You're not alone. Brilliantly Brave is hosted by two honest and engaging dads with 9 kids between them. A road tripper, author, and pastor, Father Brad Matthias, and iShine founder, solo parenting expert, and all-around foodie, Mr. Robert Beeson. Join us each week as we explore and engage with some of the most intriguing, inspiring, outrageous, and awesome parents in the world. This is Brilliantly Brave.
Hi, and welcome to Brilliantly Brave Parenting. I am Pastor Brad, here with my co-host, Robert Beeson.
Hi, Brad.
It's good to have you here, Robert.
It's good to be here, Brad.
Season 3. We're marching through Season 3.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
And I am really excited about our guest.
I am too. I'm excited too, mostly because I want to know things about you that I don't already know.
Well,
like stories, dirt, any kind of information that I otherwise can use against you.
And why do you think this person would know that?
Because you two share the responsibility of hosting Solo Parent Society, the podcast.
This is true.
So we're talking about Kimberly Mitchell.
Woo!
She's in the studio with us today.
Yay!
Welcome, Kimberly.
Kim.
This is fun, but you guys are like both looking at me, and I feel a little bit scared. Yes!
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Well, don't mess up.
We're gonna,
Just
I
give
know.
us the right answers.
Just close your eyes and we'll talk to you with your eyes closed. There you go.
It's gonna be fun.
Well, I mean, honestly, there's so much going on in our culture. People are struggling, especially parents. I think, as a pastor, I run into every kind of situation in life. And one of the most common that I run into is the family that's sort of struggling with a blended life. In other words, we've got kids from different marriages. You got a husband and a wife that are trying to raise, two different groups of kids. And so that sort of creates a new dynamic for pastors to counsel people on.
True.
And to support them and encourage them. And I feel like I don't live that life. So for me to just sort of throw down really good godly wisdom, quote unquote, in the italics, isn't helpful.
Right.
Instead, I think it's helpful to get people to a healthier place by having good role models, by having encouragement from people who've lived those experiences that have come through on the other side. And so as a pastor, it's always encouraging for me to find resources or places to direct people who are in crisis. Yep. And I know that a lot of our listeners have either been in a divorce or have been through a separation or currently in that situation, and they're looking for help.
Or they know someone that is going through that.
Absolutely. Yeah. What are the statistics? You guys are the experts on solo parenting. What is it, 60%?
A lot.
Yeah, it's 35% of American households are single-parented homes.
And how many are blended homes?
I don't know. I don't know
that's
that
a good
statistic.
question.
Okay. Well, some of the statistics I saw suggested that it was in the 60s.
I think it is.
Yeah, like 63,
really
64%. So that would mean more people live in a blended family home environment than not.
Yeah, wow.
Right? So what you guys are doing, Robert and Kim, this idea of a solo parent society, this idea of actually banding together people who might feel isolated and alone into a group that could support and encourage and even minister to each other, man, that's awesome.
Thanks. I think we are still learning a lot of things.
We are.
So I think that's why we do it. We get all the pros to help us still, but we have walked it. And it's not an easy journey, but it has been worth it in so many ways in terms of growing and learning and Jesus being very, very faithful.
Well, I want to applaud you guys for taking the step of being vulnerable to share with an audience kind of what you've been through. Robert has shared with our audience. And so maybe from a context perspective, maybe you could share with our audience just a little bit of your story, kind of where you've been and where you are now.
I am a Pentecostal preacher's kid. So right there, like
And
we're
you're
crazy.
Canadian.
And Canadian. I'm from Canada. Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. So double whammy, man. So, grew up in a Christian home my whole life. Just knowing about Jesus, believing in Jesus, although my parents were always like, this is your relationship with him. You don't get in on our coattails, but, this is what we believe in. You need to know him for yourself. And they were always so amazing. They were actually, my parents are so amazing and loved by every church we ever pastored. And we moved a lot. I'm from the east coast of Canada originally. I was born in Nova Scotia, and we lived in Prince Edward Island and New Brunswick and Ontario. We've been everywhere. Grade 12, you guys, is my 13th school.
Wow.
That's a sign of a preacher's kid. So we got to know, you get to know people. And also we were on the road for 10 years. My dad was an evangelist also. So we would travel and sing, and he would preach. And we've just been to a lot of places. But I've seen God also do lots of miracles in my life. I just truly have. I've watched people's lives truly changed. My parents have just really lived out faith in Jesus when we've had nothing, and they prayed in food, and they've prayed in clothes, and I've just watched them just trust him always. And I'm so grateful, because when you get to a dark place in your life and you go, I just need to trust the same Jesus. And he's there. So that was really my upbringing. I have two sisters. They're twins. We're only 20 months apart, but I'm the oldest. I like to tell them I'm the wisest, but they don't believe me. And so we just we've had a really decent, good life, I've met lots of people, been lots and lots of places. And I got married when I was 24, I think. And I thought I was old to be married. I wanted to be married much younger. I think that's just all I knew. I'm just going to get married. We're going to be in ministry. I don't know how, but I was a singer. So something, and I studied television, broadcasting university. So, everything's perfect and whatever. And my younger sisters got married before me. I don't even know how they thought that was even okay, but they did. And so, I didn't date a whole lot growing up, but
moving around, that would be difficult.
It was, yes. And I just wasn't, I'm like, whatever. And, I don't know. So I did get married, and there are some things that you probably should listen to your parents when they say, are you sure? And at that point in my life, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't really have many goals, to be honest, or I don't know. I just knew I'm supposed to be married. Maybe it's not my generation. I don't know. You get married, and then I'm from a ministry, whatever that is, family. So that's just all I knew. And so I did get married, and it was just hard from the get-go. And just lots of things that probably weren't right or good. But you try, and you keep trying. And we did for almost 13 years try. But in that time, had two awesome kids, two very awesome children. There were just lots of wrong things, just a lot of verbal and emotional abuse stuff that just shouldn't ever have been there and beyond. But you try. And especially when you are a Pentecostal preacher's kid whose dad is now also on one of the most famous Christian TV shows in Canada, and you're like, I feel so stuck and so stranded, and I need to make this work. Right. Because that's all because you make it work. Jesus can change anything. And so, and I believed that he could. I really believed that he could. And we went to many, many, many counselors, because I do believe you should fight for your marriage.
Right.
I absolutely do. You should. And I had one pastor, and I'm so grateful for this, in one of our counseling sessions, just say to me, Kim, because he knew it was at a very rough point and not really sure which way it was going to go. And he just said, Kim, you have to promise me one thing. If you ever do decide to leave, here's the question you have to ask yourself. When your kids come to you in 5, 10, 20 years, whenever, and say, did you try everything you could to save your marriage? You have to look at them with all honesty and without hesitancy and say, I tried everything I could, and I left without regret. Because you have to be able to say that. And if you can't say that right now, then you keep trying. And so I did for 6 more years, keep trying. And we did together at some points and not together at many points. And finally, there was too much wrong stuff. And it was just time to leave. So I had to make that decision, and I knew I did. And I did in 2009. And it was so very hard, and I was so very scared. But it was just one night, this is over. We can't connect here. And I called another pastor friend. That night was one of the darkest nights ever. And lots of threats and lots of stuff, but I just remember just talking to this pastor friend of mine who was talking me through when, my ex had left and stormed out, and I didn't know what to do. And my parents were actually away, which was actually perfect because they then couldn't be involved, which was a good thing. And I just remember him saying, he will come back and there will be more arguments, there'll be more stuff to deal with, but you just need to say these words in your head while threats or whatever are being thrown at you. And it's, do not be afraid, be strong, be confident. Because God is not absent here. He's here. He's in our messes. He's in it all. We don't want this to happen, but do not be afraid, be strong, be confident, and let God shut your mouth and guide your words and see where the next steps go. And so that actually really truly was the end, November 2009.
Wow.
And then became this single mama. I have a 5 and an 8-year-old, and we were on our own for a long time. And it was hard and it was good at the same time. Those first 6 months were dreadfully hard. I didn't know what to do. I had a part-time job, and I'm trying to figure out how to survive, and we need milk. And God is so good and so faithful. And when we think he doesn't remember where we live, he actually always shows up. And not only remembers, but then seems to surprise us. But the miracles I would pray for, or the ways I thought he should show up, are not usually the ways he would show up. And then I'd be like, oh, yeah, your way's better. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So and then we started an 8.5-year journey, I think, until I got remarried. What year did I get remarried? 2016?
16.
Wow. Woo! And now we're on that different journey.
Right.
Yeah.
Which, as I'm watching you, people listening to the podcast can't see you, but you can see it on the YouTube channel. I can see you reliving these experiences. Like, they're just as real for you today as they were when they happened.
It's hard. It's hard, and it hurts, and there's lots of pain, and you think that you've ruined these kids' lives and everyone's life, and you carry all that guilt and pain. And yet my dad used to always say, and here's something too that's hard for preachers, especially when the preacher's your dad and he can't fix his own kids' marriage. Because I've watched my dad counsel numerous families and numerous couples and been so helpful to them. And I've watched marriages restored. I've watched that, and I think it is possible. And I watched my poor dad devastated because mine wasn't.
Right.
And couldn't be, and he couldn't help. But in the dark nights is when God really brings a song. And my dad always used to say, the greatest pain brings the greatest ministry, whatever that looks like. Maybe not right now. And I'm like, well, I don't want to be in ministry then if I have to go through lots of pain. But he's like, but Kimberly, this is what God uses. He uses the dark days and the hard things. And, if it wasn't for all those dark days, and there were so many, and I'm going to cry, there were lots of tears and lots of nights I wasn't quite sure how I was going to get to the morning. But I'm so glad I went through them, because it just so showed me who Jesus was. Not my mom and dad's Jesus, my Jesus. That he was there for me. He showed up with groceries on my doorstep, and he showed up with clothes for my kids, and he showed up with Christmas one year around my tree. And I'm like, what is happening? And he showed up with furniture and everything for those 8 years, and my kids got to see him too. And I wouldn't trade it at all. I wouldn't trade the tears. I wouldn't trade the hard nights. I wouldn't trade the dark season at all. Because also then is when we are more keen to look for Jesus. I am more keen to look for him and ask him where you are than when I think everything's hunky-dory and I've got it all under control. So it was hard, but it was good.
Yeah. I know there are literally thousands of people listening to this podcast, and they're all resonating. They're saying, wow, I know someone who's just walked through that or is in the middle of it, or maybe the person listening is in the middle of that. And I know these words are very encouraging because they're coming from a place of deep authenticity. You're sincere. You've been through this yourself. You've experienced it. I know that what you and Robert are doing on the Solo Parent Society is essential because it is meeting a need for people who are in pain. Yeah. Maybe someone who's in that dark night and they haven't yet gotten that experience. What would you say to someone, especially a single mom right now, who might be struggling just to trust God because things haven't worked out the way they thought?
Yeah. It's okay. First of all, that hasn't worked out. Nothing in my life has worked out the way that I thought. I had lists. I'm like, now, Jesus, we're going to do this next. And he's like, no, honey, we're not doing that next. I'm like, what? I just think God sometimes chuckles at us too and goes, honey, it's okay. You got to trust me here. And I'm so grateful that he only sheds enough light on like 1 or 2 steps at a time. Because if he showed us the whole staircase, I'd be like, I am not going there. And he's like, oh, but you are. But here, let's just do 1 step at a time. I'll tell you the thing that saved me and saved my children was not sitting at home feeling sorry for ourselves. It's okay to grieve. I grieved. I grieved the loss of marriage. I did not want to lose my marriage. But it was the right thing for my life and for my kids. But we dove into everything at the church. Everything. We volunteered at every single thing. I dragged my kids to everything. They have worked merch at concerts. They have served in every area. I was a singer on our worship team, and we would have rehearsals at 6:00 in the morning, and they would be there with their pillows and their blankets, sleeping in the office while we're out practicing so that we can bring people to worship. Because the more you give, the more God fills you up. When we sit and we're just in that little lonesome pity party, that doesn't work. It's okay for a little, you know what, we are allowed to grieve, but when we can step out, and I remember stepping out on platforms many times, and I remember the enemy in my head going, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are that you're going to step out here? I know what you've done. I know who you are. You're divorced, this, and this. And then you get out and sing how great Jesus is, you know? And I would just be so like consumed by that, his words, actually for months. Until one day, again, we're just about to step out and help people just leave all their baggage and worship Jesus for 20 minutes, you know? And I remember hearing all those words again, and I'm like, you're right. I do not deserve to be here. You're right. I am a failure. I have failed at so many things. But what I do know, and the reason I am going to sing with all that I've got, is because I know who Jesus is, and I know what he's done. So, devil, you can just...
And that's why we worship.
That's
because
why
we're not
we worship. That's exactly right. And when you lift that up, it changes you. And that's another thing for single mamas. You get up in the morning and you throw on K-Love or some worship music, and you change the atmosphere in your house. Those babies of yours are eating breakfast while, you know, How Great Is Our God is being played. Because whether they like it or not, those words are going into, what goes into the mind comes out in a life. I am so positive of that. So when we fill our house with that, it changes me, and it changes my kids, and it changes the atmosphere in our house. And that was one of my secret weapons. I just played so much worship music. It's the thing that filled me. There were days I'm like, I don't even know how to pray. I don't know what to say. But this song just covers it for me.
Right.
That's not like, I don't know what else. Just dive in, help other people. And Jesus will take care of you.
Yeah.
He does. He does.
It's so cool. I think many people are in these different moments of life where their path is unclear, where they have they've been caught.
Yeah.
Either they made a bad choice or a poor decision, or someone has done something wrong to them and they're caught. They can't get out of the situation they're in. And they may find themselves alone. They may find themselves in a situation where they feel isolated and completely lost. I know there had to be moments in your story when you felt that way.
Totally.
Because we have the hindsight now. You're looking back and you're going, okay, the Lord led me. He provided for me. But there had to be moments when you were in that place where you're like, I don't see how this is ever going to be a good story.
Yeah. And you feel deserted and alone. And I asked God many times where he was and what was wrong with me and why nobody would ask me out on a date. I'm like, what is wrong with me? And totally had a meltdown when I turned 40 and still hadn't been asked out on a date going, oh. But I had also all those years asked Jesus to protect us. I'm like, please protect me and these kids. What should not be in our life, don't bring to our life. So it's funny, right? We pray for him to protect us, and then we're like, but why? I know. He's like, because I'm protecting you.
Right.
But feeling broken and
so
feeling
broken.
like empty is a normal part.
Normal. Yeah, and no purpose. Like all my dreams are, like, I've got none anymore. There are no dreams anymore. I'm just trying to buy groceries and keep 2 kids fed and at school and work full time. And go to church and just try.
Because it's important for people out there that have gone through or are going through the broken space that might listen to this podcast and go, well, she got through it because she's so energetic and has all the answers and whatever. And I think it's important for them to know that there were days that you didn't feel like you had all the answers. And that's okay.
I still do not have any answers.
But I mean, to feel the ache of
absolutely.
I don't think this is going to work out.
There are days you don't want to get out of bed.
And there are days you don't, you almost wish there wasn't another day.
Yep.
I mean, I'm not talking about real suicide thoughts, but just like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Except, yes. But when you've got those 2 little kids, that man will get you out of bed. Because I wanted to then my whole being a mom, it changed me. I think I was a better mom through my season because it was me and them at that moment. For me, I became a better parent because I was so focused on them. But those dark, hard moments, we just get to choose.
Right.
God gives us a choice. We can put our foot on the floor every morning and choose to be miserable and speak miserably about our day, or we can put our foot on the floor and go, okay, I don't like this. I am broken and I don't know how to do it, but I'm going to choose to trust Jesus even when I don't feel like it. I'm going to choose to smile today because I think that's important. I'm going to choose to talk to the woman at Walmart because she is probably going through a hard time too, my cashier, and just go, how are you today? Because, we're all in this together. And we just get to choose. And I say that to my kids all the time. I used to have this board in our house, and I used to write quotes on it. I don't know if they like it or not, or if they'll ever remember. But one of them was, we don't always get to choose what happens to us, but we always get to choose our response to what happens to us. We get to choose it. We get to choose to be negative or be positive, or to choose. We get to choose. And I think once I realized that, and when my mom said to me one day, Kimberly, dear, the dishes don't matter, and the house doesn't matter, and, the laundry undone doesn't matter. Your time with those kids matters, and your time with Jesus matters. So you get to choose, and you're in this season. Don't despise the winter season or the desert season, because there's much growth in that season.
I think it's so true. And I think we're so quick sometimes to want to get past the things that we're going through and to want to cure it, answer it, feel better, whatever, instead of just resting where we are and not fighting it.
Yeah.
Because that's when, a pastor friend told me once, he said, do you know why really tough winters are so important to farmers? It's really important that there's a really harsh winter, because when it's a really harsh winter, the roots have to go deeper.
Right.
And I think that's what happens to us when we go through these solo seasons. I've heard another person say, it's the trees that grow on the side of mountains. If the winds weren't really strong, it wouldn't force the roots to go deep.
Right. That's so true.
But if you're just trying to look to get out of the wind, or you're just trying to look to get out of the winter or the situation, you miss the depth of what is right in front of you. And sometimes, as you and I talk about all the time, that is the most transformational thing that we could possibly encounter.
Some things need to die before there can be growth. And if we do miss that season and don't dig and put our roots in deeper, then we're more apt to just keep making the same mistakes. Right?
Absolutely.
So we need to go deeper. It's an important season, the broken season.
Yeah, I was listening to both of you talk, and as a pastor, I see the fear of being alone as a primary factor for a lot of single parents. They're so afraid of going through a season of life alone.
Yeah.
They feel vulnerable. They feel ill-equipped. They feel just so inadequate for the task. And one of the things that's very encouraging to me, and I want to encourage our listeners, is that there is a season sometimes of pruning, as the Bible describes it, where God is actually removing some things that need to go and is actually making you healthier.
Yes.
And I can hear it in your story.
I'm a far better person, mom, and now wife, because of that season. If I would have jumped right in and not had those 8 or 8.5 years, I just wouldn't. I'm so glad I had them. It was so important. Listen, when I had to figure out how to do an oil change in the car, and I had to figure out, what is this filter for the furnace? What? And I would get so mad going, I shouldn't have to be the one to do these things. And it was almost like I could hear Jesus laughing a little bit going, but Kimberly, you can do it. And we'll do it together. It's like he would just whisper often to me, but you can do it. I'm here with you. And there's a verse in the Bible. Oh, I should have looked it up before I came, and now I can't even remember where it is. Oh, I'll think of it. But where God just says, I'm going to take you to the desert, and I'm going to woo you again, and I will become your husband. These verses meant so much to me, which is so terrible that I can't remember that. But there was a season they were so awesome. He was like, I will woo her back to me, Jesus said. And bring her flowers, it even says, actually in one version. And she will again call me husband. Jesus. And that was what I took on for those years. I'm like, it's me and you. And that is the best place I could be. It's a good place.
I have heard that frequently from widows and from single moms, because in a sense, single parenthood is like being a widow.
Yeah.
And so there is this grieving process. There's this isolation. Yep. You've lost that other person. And I've heard that a lot, more often than not, that I'll hear the description that Christ became my husband.
Yeah.
Not in a weird way, but in a really healthy, honest way. He met the needs in my heart, the emotional needs, my support that I could not have.
Hey, listen, that's so true. And there are practical things too. In those first couple of years, I went to bed at 9 p.m. so that I couldn't be on the computer, so that no one could, it was me and my kids, and that was my focus. And also, my kids still had a father to go visit, every weekend at that point, or every other weekend. And one other word of advice I just have is kindness wins. It wins. I know lots of people are going through horrible seasons with their exes, but we all have these children that watch us all the time, and they are not going to do what we say. They are going to do what we do. So if we can extend kindness and bite our tongue, my mom always used to say, now, Kimberly, dear, is this the hill you want to die on today? Like, biting your tongue a lot in that season, so these kids can watch that you can go through hard things and still be a good, graceful, kind Jesus person, and Jesus person, and I just think we also have to choose kindness when dealing with the hard, other stuff.
Yeah, and what's interesting, I've observed that you have this bubbly sort of encouraging spirit about you.
Well,
so you've been through some stuff, but it hasn't. It may have scarred you at some level, but it didn't destroy you. It didn't define you. Well, you're definitely not that person.
Because Jesus defines us.
Yeah. Well, I could only endorse that. Like that to me is like one of the greatest joys of life, is to see someone go through something very difficult, even tragic, and come out on the other side whole.
Yeah.
Like, how is that possible?
Right.
How could you get through something that painful, that devastating, and be whole? And yet it is the promise of faith to the Christian. And you're exemplifying that. It doesn't mean you're perfect.
Oh, my goodness.
Right? Doesn't mean you have all the answers.
Don't call my parents right now.
Right.
They're like, yeah, no, not at all. It's just remarkable who Jesus is and how he walks our journey with us.
Yeah.
And that season is over. I'm in a new season, man. You learn new stuff. Yes.
Yeah, and I'm a grandfather now, so like I'm in a new season.
Yes.
And my kids have grown to a point where now, as a different role completely than I've had in the past. But it's not easier. No. It's just different.
Yes.
And so I think that's an important lesson that we carry with us, that we know that they're in good hands, that our kids are in good hands, like we were in good hands, and that his grace is sufficient for them like it was for us. So, Robert, do you have any last thoughts before we say goodbye to Kim?
It's so fun. Like, I'm listening to her. We talk so much that I don't know if there's any other questions that I could ask, but I think what you said, Brad, is exactly true. I know from me, and I know Kim and I have talked about this, like, sometimes we feel like, God, do you even know what's going on with my kids? I mean, because we see the damage that's being done. And even after divorce, many, many years after the divorce, you start seeing even facets of it show up in their personal life. And I can remember, specifically one day I was praying, and I was just praying for my kid. I was so earnestly hurting for a situation. And I, not audibly, it wasn't like this, but I heard this voice in my spirit basically say, Robert, do you know that I love you? Yes. Do you know that I pursue you, that I do anything for you? Yes. Do you know, and go all the, because I came to know that as a solo parent.
Yeah.
But then it ended with like this. Do you think I love them any less?
Yeah.
I am pursuing them.
Yes.
As much as I pursued you.
Yeah. I
am absolutely aware of every facet of everything that they're going through. As much as you know that I'm after you, Robert, I'm after them. Yeah. So I've got it. Single parents, we carry that burden of like this damaged, like bag of whatever, like family remnants. And it's just so important to remember.
And they're his in the first place. We just get to take care of them. It's like his imprint is on their life.
And he knew that we were going to be divorced or widowed or whatever it is prior to giving us the kids.
And this is part of their story.
Right.
And part of the purpose that he has for their life, this has to be part of their story. And sometimes it really sucks to watch them cry and to watch them go, why did this happen? And yet it's part of their story. And somewhere down the line, they might be sitting right here going, but if I didn't walk through that, then Jesus couldn't have taken me here in my life. And they may not even know where he's taking them for a long time. But the way that their life then will impact someone else's life, it's all part of the story that
he is authoring.
That he is authoring. And when he holds the pen, way better than when I hold the pen and try to write the story. And so you're so right. We have to so trust Jesus with our kids.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No,
and that never ends.
Never ends.
No matter how we get, I'm beginning to understand this is never going to end. I'm going to have to trust God over and over with my kids. Well, I have the sense that we could talk quite a while.
We could. Robert and I have proven that before.
Well, for those who are enjoying this conversation, I would encourage you to go check out soloparentsociety.com. Find out more about Kimberly and Robert. Find out about the ministry they're doing there. Find out more about their story and download and follow their podcast. I strongly encourage that. Or share it with someone that you think could be encouraged by that.
Yes.
Because we here at Brilliantly Brave Parenting understand that none of us feel brilliant or brave.
Yeah.
That's not something we have a patch that we put on our sleeve, but rather it's something we aspire to someday to be brilliant and brave. And we're finding out that through Christ, he is all the things we're not. So
Absolutely.
God bless you. Thanks for being on our show.
Thank you.
Robert, that was fantastic. You get to work with her all the time?
She's awesome.
Yeah, she is awesome. And
it's infectious.
Yeah, she has that sort of just bubble.
Yeah.
Like bubbly,
but
happy thing.
In an authentic kind of, I've been there before and I've gone through it before, but you know, I mean, it's, you get some of these people that are just really bubbly and energetic and there's all kinds of just mojo about them, but it's just kind of one. But Kim, she's like, there's a lot of depth. She's a very wise woman.
Yeah. And one of the things that I love, we as Christians, and I'm including myself in the conversation, this idea that we go, well, just give it to Jesus, or we say things like God is enough or he can meet all your needs. These are sort of things that we say as Christians in church talk, if you will. And that's true. It's true in the broad sense. But when you can dial into someone's story tight enough, focused enough to say, this is how God shows up. This is what it looks like for a single mom going through a divorce, raising 2 kids by herself. Yeah. Man, there's power in that. That's testimony stuff.
I agree. I agree.
So my
story of God's faithfulness.
Yeah, I was just so encouraged by her story, just the fact that she was willing to share it. I was blown away just by the depth of the emotion that's still there.
Oh yeah.
A decade later.
Yeah. No doubt.
Yeah. So I was very encouraged, number one, that her story doesn't end in despair. It ends in total redemption. God brought her through this very difficult time of divorce and being a single mom. But also this idea that she didn't just accept her fate, like she didn't just roll over into despair and bitterness and cynicism. She kept her joy. She fought for her hope and her faith, and she included herself, or she inserted herself into the local church.
Right.
She talked about how she took her kids to church. They were there for everything. They volunteered for everything. She turned on Christian music all the time in her home. She was really fighting back the darkness.
She was deliberate about what she was doing.
Yeah. Well, how courageous is that? I mean,
I think a temptation for all of us that we go through the dark season is, and everybody has a dark season. It could look like divorce. It could look like, death. It could just look like depression or whatever. It's sometimes it can be tempting to just sit and wait it out instead of doing something. And I think that's what Kim did. And I know that's what Kim did. She sought out ways to not make everything better, but to just use her time wisely. And I think that's when God shows up.
There were a couple quotes she said that really caught my attention. I took the time to write them down. One, she said, the more you give, the more the Lord fills you up. And to be spoken in the context of that story, where she would be expecting to receive all the time, when you're alone and you're beat up and you're feeling broken by life, at that point, you're really not thinking about giving.
That's true.
You're thinking about all the needs you have, not what you can do for someone else. That's a remarkable, I mean, just in that is a remarkable faith that she exhibited. The second thing is she said, kindness wins. And you could see in her eyes, like there were so many stories that we didn't hear, like there were so many situations that were going through her mind as memories.
Your tongue, be kind.
Yeah. She said that like 3 times and she would just sort of look off in the distance as she said it, like reliving these moments. And so I was just sort of encouraged that, there's so much truth in that.
Kindness is a discipline. It's not something that's just...
It's not spontaneous.
No.
It's a choice.
Right.
Yeah, it's a choice. And it's kind of like humility. You know, people say, well, I'm praying for humility. You don't pray for humility. you pursue. Yeah, you put humility on like clothes, the Bible says. You know, you put it on you. It's a choice. And so kindness and humility are these sort of powerful evidences that there is something else at work in your life, right? These are the outward manifestations of an inward reality. The reality is that Kim, in her despair and in her loneliness, found Christ to be enough. And so for whoever's listening, whether you're alone by circumstance or choice, God's enough for you. You don't have to run from the experience you're in to get into a worse one.
And not in a trite way, like we started.
Right.
But he actually is enough.
And as a pastor, I can't tell you how many terrible choices I've seen by people who are just so lonely. They could not wait for God to show up.
Right.
They were determined to take circumstances into their own hands and really regretted it and really hurt themselves. And so what a beautiful story here of a young woman who was willing to wait, was willing for God to pick her path, as she put it, to pen the story, to hold the pen of her story.
Yeah.
Man, that was just so encouraging. And, you know, I look at her today and I see just what God's using her for, and the fact that she's happily married, remarried to a dear friend of ours, Brian Mitchell, and just this life that God has led her into and the fullness of it. And it's got to be a huge encouragement to anyone who's feeling like that could never be for them.
True. Absolutely true.
Yeah, let Kim's story be an inspiration for you today. And, you know, as we look at our schedule and we think about season 3 of this podcast, you know, it's always such an encouragement when we get to deal with those real things. And this was a real talk today.
Yeah.
You know, this wasn't theory.
I don't know that Kim has any other way of, I mean, she's,
well, you get to work with her all the time. That's my first real conversation.
There's just one, she's just authentic and real, and, you know, like, It is what it is. I mean, she's like that all the time. It's a blessing. I get to work with her every week.
I just love the fact that she's a Canadian. Every once in a while, you kind of hear that in her in her answers. She definitely had a little bit of the Canadian influence on her, but you know, there's just something really encouraging by the story of redemption and the endless ways that God redeems our lives. And so, I hope our listeners today were as blessed as I was. And I look forward to maybe having Kim back on the show. Well, next week, we're going to be talking with an old friend of the podcast, author and pastor, Robert Nolan.
Yes, I'm excited. He's one of those just spiritual utility knives. Like, you know, you go to him and like, what about this? And he knows he's very, very wise.
I mean, how many times a month we talk to someone and they go, "Oh yeah, well, Robert managed me."
Exactly. Just this week.
Well, we talked to one of our season 3 guests this year. It was Phil, right?
Phil Stacy.
Phil Stacy said,
"Oh, I know Robert."
Yeah, I know Robert. And we go, "How could you know Robert?" He's like, "Well, he managed me." And it's like,
of course he did.
Well, it's like, you know, so Robert Nolan is the Kevin Bacon of the Christian media world.
Without doubt.
Yeah, 5 degrees separation. So
6 degrees.
6, 7, whatever. All right. Thanks. God bless you guys. And we'll be here next week.
See you next week.
Parents, remember, even if you may not feel brilliant or brave, you are. For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control. And I am not ashamed, for I know whom I have believed. I am convinced that he is able to guard until that day what has been entrusted to me. 2 Timothy 1:7 and 13. This podcast is a service of iShine Ministries and the Tween Gospel Alliance. All rights reserved. Donations to Brilliantly Brave are tax deductible at iShineLive.com. Review and subscribe to this podcast on SoundCloud, Stitcher, iTunes, or on our webpage. And read our blog and connect with us at WordPress@BrilliantlyBrave.com. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Brilliantly Brave.
There is an intersection, a critical one that cannot be ignored. It's the intersection of child, parent, and church during the critical tween years. Tweens. These 7 to 12-year-olds are not only navigating rapid social, physical, and emotional development, but a significant spiritual development is happening too. This is a key moment where their worldview moves from forming to formed. Their beliefs about God, the Bible, and church are settling into a mold that will significantly shape the rest of their lives, all while their attention is being fought for by more media and marketing than ever before, especially as they move from purchase influencers to decision makers. A shift is also happening for the tweens' parents. As your kids are younger, you play a more authoritative, directive, and protective role in your child's life. But as your tween grows in their independence, there's a shift to a more guiding, coaching, and supporting role. This transition can be a challenge to navigate, especially when your child seems suddenly disengaged from the family. Also in the middle of this crucial intersection is the church. Here, tweens are moving from children's ministry to youth. And in the midst of this foundational moment in their worldview, many are lost or losing interest and disappearing from the church. You see, there's a problem. This intersection is lacking infrastructure. Like an unfinished highway, there's chaos and confusion. Tweens aren't sure what signs to follow. Parents feel stuck and frustrated. And the church is seeing huge drop-off at this age. People are lost in a moment where so much is at stake for tweens, parents, and the church. This is why the Tween Gospel Alliance exists. For TGA, our desire is to be the catalyst that brings strategic partnership and increased awareness to the tween intersection, so that tweens have a better chance to become authentic and active followers of Christ. TGA will build infrastructure by curating the best resources out there at Tween Central, where parents and pastors can find tools, programs, and more to better equip them to lead their tweens. We will establish events that stir the hearts and minds of pastors for the tweens in their churches, and events that give tweens and their parents a unique and shared faith experience. TGA will also be a tween advocate to pastors and parents, educating them on this crucial life stage. Our plan doesn't include owning buildings or selling products. And once the infrastructure is in place, we don't plan on sticking around, because ultimately, it's churches, parents, and other organizations that must own this intersection. We may wish that there was one simple solution, but there isn't. It's going to take all of us working together, and that's why we're an alliance of organizations, pastors, and parents. Tweens are a vital part of the church and the community. They hold the potential to change the world, and we have a vital role to play in their journey. They need you at the intersection. Meet us there.
iShine is a faith-based ministry and media company that looks and feels a lot like a Christian version of Disney. iShine is more than entertainment. We're the producer of the largest Christian tween TV series in the world, a nationally syndicated radio show, a Nashville-based record label, host to multiple live tours and summer festivals, an interactive website and social media, and a provider of printed and digital devotionals, preteen Bibles, and church curriculums. But more than anything, we're a trusted Christian resource for parents and pastors. You can turn to us for all things tween. Check us out at ishinelive.com.